Hey everyone, Austin here again with another Let's Play video. Today, as you can see, it is going to be Dynowarz, the destruction of Spondylus. This is a relatively average side-scrolling action platformer for the NES. I still have a soft spot for it though because I did play it a lot as a kid. I've also previously done long plays and Let's Plays of this game many years ago. And since it's been so long and I've got better video quality now, it's time to redo it, revisit it. Probably not going to be the most exciting playthrough because it is Dynowarz. I mean, it sounds really cool, looks kind of cool, sort of, and it's just not all that exciting. You guys will see exactly what I mean once we jump into it. So, once we beat the game, actually, what I'm going to do is actually try out a couple of passwords here I'm looking at, which apparently gives us a sound test and a enemy viewer. So we'll see what those look like as well at the end of the playthrough. So if you're interested in that, or if you don't even want to see the playthrough, just skip to the end of the video and to check those out. But yeah, pretty straightforward game. Before I jump into it, as always, I want to give a big shout out to my current Patreon backers, and so they're going to flash by the screen. Thank you guys for your continued patronage. Likewise with the recent live stream super chatters and channel members, so they're going to flash by too. So with that, let's go ahead and hit start. And we're going to jump into basically this platforming section. You saw dinos on the screen, but interspersed between the dino levels, you actually have these sections where you're just this guy running around, and the idea is to destroy a core and then run back out. Now on this first level, you actually have to run to your dino, so you're basically in a bay of sorts, and the idea is to basically get your dino and go on your mission or whatever you want to call it. So here we go. Here's our dino, and now starts the fun stuff, quote unquote. Sort of, kind of, not really, because, like I said in the beginning of the video, Dynowarz is not all that exciting of a game. It's very competent. It, it looks okay. It can sound okay. It plays okay, I guess. It's quite competent, but there's just not a whole lot that's actually exciting about the game. So we just picked up our first weapon. It's the balls, and you can also pick up this one called the launch fist. Each of your main weapons in the Dino mode can be upgraded 3 times, and so they get faster and more powerful and whatnot. Actually, the more powerful part might be a little subjective, because I have actually upgraded my weapons all the way, and they don't really oftentimes seem that much more powerful, but maybe I'm just imagining things here. So what we're going to do is actually switch back to the balls, because I actually kind of prefer this weapon. It goes all the way across the screen. I can sort of fire it like this, and I can time the shot a little bit better than I can with these other attacks. And so when I see other weapons like that, a lot of times what I do is I just avoid them, and I stick with the ball attack. Also, something that's kind of interesting in this game, if there's a weapon underneath a platform like that, if you touch the top of the platform still, you will grab it. Your dino actually seems to have a relatively large hitbox on his, basically around his torso area and his legs and whatnot. His upper body actually doesn't really seem to have a hitbox at all, which is kind of interesting. So, like, I don't know if you noticed, you can rewind to check it out. That bullet just completely passed over my head, and so did that one, and didn't do any damage to me. And this is the bomb weapon, probably the worst weapon in the game. It basically shoots these bombs overhead. Now, I say the worst weapon in the game because there are several enemies in this game that have a tendency of jumping backwards, and when they do that, they'll just completely avoid the ball attack. Now, some of the boss design in this game is quite irritating. A lot of enemies in this game, when you hit them, they'll rush forward at you for some unknown reason. I don't know why they do that. It's a really odd design choice because it basically forces you to have to take hits, which could be a little aggravating. So it actually looks like one of those enemies dropped a power-up icon, which lets me shoot two sets of bullets at once. Normally, when you're in these alternate side-scrolling sections, you can only shoot one set of bullets at once. But having the ability to shoot 2 is really handy. And we can actually just jump straight up here, go across this way. Kind of like in some other NES games from the time, you can actually press down and jump to basically fall through platforms. I don't really recommend it on this area because it's just not all that useful. So this is our boss fight. We basically have to fight this boss like a good 7 times throughout the game or so. So in sections like this where you're relatively safe, you can just get up close to it and just mash the button as quickly as possible. Later on, there are going to be big platforms, not big platforms, but big open areas, big endless pits in front of the boss, so you're going to have to actually take it out long range. But in the early parts of the game, a lot of times you can get right up in front of it and take it out a little bit faster. So now we have to jump on this platform, which takes us to stage 2. And we basically have to do this 7 times over the course of the game. I believe it's 7 times. And that is Dynowarz in a nutshell. There's really not a whole lot else to explain, but I'll try to do my best to talk. That's a mine there on the ground. You don't want to touch that, because when you do, it explodes and does damage to you, obviously. Let's actually go ahead and switch back to the launch fist. I'd rather have that than the bomb. I'd rather have either the laser or the balls, which are basically full screen, projectile attacks. But when it comes to the bomb or the launch fist, I'd rather have the launch fist, because the launch fist actually loops around. It'll come back and hit the enemies again. But look at that. That big guy just dropped the ball firepower as well. So that is something to keep in mind as well. Bigger enemies in this game have a tendency of being the ones that drop power-ups. So you've got to watch out for that if you don't want to switch weapons. See, there we go. And I don't want that. Something I haven't really noted yet is that you can actually sort of make enemies walk off the left-hand side of the screen. If they get too far to the left-hand edge, they'll basically give up. They'll say, screw it, and they'll just walk in the opposite direction. They'll go off the screen. So if you're trying to play for like 100%, if you're trying to kill absolutely everything, you got to keep that in mind. And here's a jumping enemy again. Fortunately, he's jumping forward and not backwards. The backwards ones could be kind of annoying if you have the bomb attack. Now, jumping over platforms, I keep saying platforms, I don't know why, but when you try to jump over endless pits in this game, I noticed that your character falls off a ledge rather early compared to something like Mega Man or Castlevania or something. See, in Mega Man or Castlevania, I would be hanging off the ledge still, and it still does that a little bit in this. So notice that his foot is partway off the platform, but he falls much sooner than those games. So platforming is a little bit tighter in this game. You need to jump earlier in this game. And now you do get infinite continues, which is one of the things that makes this game a little bit easier. But you do have to do the level over again as well. So, if you don't want to lose too much progress, it's good to not die. It's good to not fall into pits and whatnot. Yeah, the platforming can be a little tricky in that regard. It's not as bad on... Oh, this is our laser right here. So it's called Beam. So I'll go ahead and stick with this for a little bit just so you guys can see what it's like. But yeah, I mean, that's basically Dynowarz in a nutshell. Same with spikes here. If you touch them, you'll take damage. But you kind of want to jump over them early. Otherwise, you'll end up touching them before you jump over them. So this is sort of a pterodactyl boss. These guys are pretty common in the game as both bosses and enemies. The bosses in this are pretty uninspired, to be honest with you, and a lot of them end up appearing as regular enemies in the game, except for, I believe, maybe the final boss or another boss close to that point in the game. So yeah, Dynowarz isn't the most, it's kind of creative, but it's kind of like not at the same time. It's one of those games where like you feel like there was a lot of potential that was just sort of missed. I was actually playing this on Twitch the other day just to do a quick practice session because I had to force myself to play through this game on Twitch. It's not that I don't like the game or anything. I do enjoy Dynowarz because I played it as a kid. I've got the nostalgia for it, and it is a competent game. Like, the graphics are decent, some of the music is alright, and some of the gameplay can be enjoyable, but there's just not much difficulty. There's not much of a difficulty spike in this game at all. It's just kind of like one of those games you could fall asleep to playing. It's not like a Ninja Gaiden or Castlevania or Mega Man where you kind of have to stay on your toes in order to get through it. It's just, shut out the lights in your brain sort of game. And, some people really enjoy those. Me, I enjoyed those a lot more as a kid than I do now as an adult. And when I was thinking on Twitch when I was playing this, I was like, man, this final boss here, this should have been the first boss in the game. Because it was a lot more interesting to me than any other boss we had fought in the game. Because for one, it was unique compared to other bosses we fought. And two, it posed some sense of challenge. Not really, not, you know, compared to the rest of the game it posed a challenge, but it still was a cakewalk, you know. So that should have been like the basis for the difficulty, in my opinion. Not, you know, the earlier bosses that we did end up getting. So yeah, Dynowarz is just one of those games I feel that like had a lot of potential, but that potential was sort of squandered. I mean, maybe everything we see here was just, you know, completely intended, you know, on the developers' parts. Maybe this is exactly what they wanted to make, but it just feels like it is something to me, personally, that could have been so much more. And that is the bomb attack. We don't want that. The laser sub-weapon, or the beam sub-weapon, and the bomb sub-weapons, they look very similar to each other. So, you know, if you've got the beam and you don't want to switch it, but you do want to upgrade it, you need to make sure you can pick apart the bomb from the laser. So there we go. There's the beam, number 2. So beam number 2 actually shoots up another projectile at a 45-degree angle, which is quite nice. The ball sub-weapon actually will do a 3-way shot. And now I actually haven't picked up the beam sub-weapon in a while. I don't usually get it. I usually just play with the, I use the ball weapon, because, you know, it's just a good 3-way shot. You end up picking it up much earlier in the game, so it's easier to get it fully powered up. One other thing that I wanted to note about this game is that, you know, you could shoot out multiple projectiles at once, but only one projectile will actually make contact with the enemy and do damage. So having spread shots in this game doesn't really have a huge purpose outside of just covering greater screen space. Basically making like aerial enemies easier to take down. That's about it. You know, you don't have to aim as well, you know, with your spread shot. So so that's another thing that is kind of a little, I don't want to say irritating, but just, it's another one of those examples of things where, like, I feel like the game was undercooked, like half-baked, as they would say. Because one of the fun things about games that have, you know, spread shots, it's getting up and doing what's called point blanking, where you get up really close to an object, you can shoot the shot faster or in a more rapid succession, because a lot of these old games would have you not being able to fire again until your bullets are off the screen or they disappeared. Or in this case, I can shoot up to 2 times with my power-up. But being up close, I can shoot much faster. So you look at how much faster I can shoot here, as opposed to being like this. There's a big gap between my bullets. But since, you know, multiple bullets connecting at once in this game don't really do anything, you can't point blank. So there's that whole element, there's that whole technique that is just completely absent in this game. So for me, the more techniques available like that, the more interesting a game is to play. And Dynowarz lacks a lot of those, I don't want to say more advanced classic game techniques, but, you know, they are techniques that do, you know, enhance the depth of the game. So I'm trying to do this kind of without dying, but if we do die, I'm not really too worried about it. One thing that is kind of interesting about these platforms here is you can actually sort of squeeze your way into the inside of them like that. So there are times where you'll think that you're going to fall into a pit, but you'll end up like latching onto the corner of the platform. And it's a little bit difficult to do on command, but you know, it does happen quite a bit actually in these secondary platforming sections. Now you'll notice that these sections also just sort of repeat the same things over and over. Not really the same things over and over, but it's the same themes over and over. It's the same type of level. You know, they get a little more complex as the game goes on, but there's never a point in the game where they're like really difficult or anything like that. They do have more dangerous platforming sections, but as long as you're patient, you shouldn't really have much trouble getting through them. And there we go, Beam 3, and it is a spread shot again. So I just picked up an E icon there. The E icons are basically energy. So you've got your energy meter up top, and then a barrier meter down below. The barrier meter is basically the equivalent of the energy meter. And I'm gonna try to just hit that guy like that. Yeah, the barrier meter is basically the equivalent of the energy meter, except it's just a second life bar. It acts as a shield, basically. So, regardless of where your energy meter is, as long as you have some barrier energy, you won't take any loss to your energy meter. Now, it's kind of hard to die in this game from taking a lot of damage. It actually happened to me on Twitch the other day when I was practicing this, because I was just getting really lazy. I was walking straight over spikes just to go through the levels a little bit quicker, and I ended up actually dying in, you know, one of the alternate side-scrolling sections. So it is entirely possible to die in this game from taking too much damage. You kind of have to try pretty hard, because a lot of these enemies will drop, you know, energy pills, and I have to get that. That sucks. There's no way around it. So we're back to our level 1 bomb attack, but hopefully this guy drops a good weapon, or a better weapon. Any weapon in this game is better than the bomb. I mean, I'd rather even have my starting fist over using the bomb attack. And you can see why the bomb's not all that useful. You've kind of got to make range in order to, you know, to be effective with it. And if you're right up close to an enemy like that, you're not going to hit them. Now, one of the problems with changing weapons in this game is you go all the way back down to level 1, so you don't retain your levels, and so it's not nearly as satisfying to swap weapons in this game. It's one of the reasons why I prefer to just stick with a single weapon. Preferably one of the spread shot weapons, and that's pretty much the way. You know what, let's actually kind of screw around here, because I know some of you guys want to see probably the fully upgraded weapons for some of these other attacks. So I'll try to get the launch fist up to level 3. Now the launch fist is one of those attacks where you've got to... Actually, you know what, let's go ahead and do balls level 3. I think I've actually already done balls level 3, but we'll do balls level 3 again. And that's the laser power-up, or the beam. I keep calling it by laser, but really it's called beam. So fortunately these guys are they're just kind of hopping around like idiots. They're not really like charging at me, which is nice, but a lot of the later enemies in the game have a tendency of just charging straight at you when you hit them. Again, it's kind of a weird mechanic, because in most situations you have no way to avoid them. They're too big to jump over. They're too fast to move away from, so it's just kind of an irritating mechanic. It's, you know, you attack an enemy and then you're forced to take damage for playing well. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But it is what it is. It is Dynowarz. That is how Dynowarz works, so you just kind of got to deal with it. And here we go. We're just going to be taking our time now. On these blue platforms, you can actually fall through them by pressing down and jump. So you need to make sure that if you're ducking on those platforms, you don't press the jump button too early. I have actually killed myself by falling through those platforms by accident. That is one of the things about Dynowarz, is that you can make really dumb mistakes like that, and it just is a kick in the nuts, if you have nuts, because it's one of those things that you're like, I should have thought about that, but I didn't, and now I'm dead. I've got to do this monotonous section over again. So here we go. We have to actually, you know, shoot this guy long range, but it's not really anything to worry about. You can just sort of sit there and you're shielded by the higher platform, which is nice. And here's an example of being able to fall through the platform. And we work our way back. Notice that this platforming section right here is pretty much identical to one of the ones we experienced earlier in the playthrough. That's how Dynowarz is. It gets, you know, lots of repetitious, you know, room usage. Even the outdoor areas when you're in your dinosaur mode are very similar to one another. Usually this game doesn't stack platforms like in more than like 2s, 3s, or 4s in this game. So here we go. Oh, look at this. We've got a platform level that's up 1, up 2, and then back down 1, and then back down 2, back to where we started. Oh, it's gonna dip down a little bit further. That's good. And back up. So that's usually the extent of this game's platforming variety, and so this is an example of where it goes up, you know, 4 ways. So you can get up to closer to the sky, and you know, maybe you can use that to attack the pterodactyl if maybe you're trying to do like a fist-only run or something like that. So now we've got balls 3. We're gonna actually switch over to the launch fist. I actually wasn't intending on landing on it like that. You can get bumped into power-ups in this game. And that can be really frustrating. One of the things I like to do is make sure I don't kill the enemies when they're right on top of me, because if I do, they drop something like that, and if it's a weapon, you get the weapon automatically, and that's not cool. So, Especially if it's like you've got your beam up to level 3 and then the bomb lands right on top of you. And that's happened to me in this playthrough. So there are irritating design choices like that in this game. There we go, Launch Fist number 2. So Launch Fist number 2 is actually pretty solid. It is much faster. And let's just get up on this platform right here and kill this guy like that. Also, if you attack certain enemies too quickly, your projectiles will end up going straight through them. So that is also kind of interesting as well. So you've got to watch out for that. It's the most common with the Launch Fist here, as it just kind of like comes back really quickly. So you've kind of got to be on point with your attacks in this game in order for it to feel a little bit better than I think it normally does. Let's see what this guy gives us. I'm intentionally trying to kill him, but he just keeps jumping at me. And it's a bomb, so we don't want that. But yeah, these guys right here, these little turrets in the ground, they have a tendency of, you know, your shots have a tendency of going through them if you attack them too quickly. See, if you're up like right next to them, so it's something to keep in mind in this game if you're trying to be really accurate with your shots. And here we go, Launch Fist number 3. And it's basically the same thing, except now it goes all the way across the screen, at least if you're towards the middle of the screen. Yeah, and so it's not actually all the way across the screen. We're gonna actually try to kill this guy over the, you know, closer to this side. See if we can time it. There we go. Usually those pterodactyl guys, they have a tendency of dropping either a barrier or energy. And I wanted one or the other because my life is actually getting kind of low. Part of it is my fault. Like, you know, that big dino we fought inside the cave there, I didn't have to fight him. I just wanted to see what he was going to drop. And I want to wait for this guy to jump over here, kind of like that, because what he'll end up doing is I'll try to jump over this weapon, and he'll bump me into the weapon. Even though technically the beam is probably the better weapon to have, it's a lot more powerful. You don't have to wait for it to come back. So like the Launch Fist is kind of neat. If you can time it right, you can actually get it to where, you know, you can actually hit the enemy on the way back around, kind of like that. And you've got to get the timing just right. There we go. So we hit him with the weapon coming, looping back around. So there are some fun, like, you know, techniques like that and, you know, gameplay elements, but moments like that are pretty rare in this game, so don't get too used to them. Now, what's also kind of interesting about these sections here is your inputs can actually be eaten because, you know, these actually are the more busy sections in the game as far as you know, projectiles are concerned. Enemies have a tendency of shooting out way more often on these sections. And I'm just going to play it safe from a distance here. You want to watch out jumping on these sections as well, because if you get hit mid-air, your character will actually get knocked backwards, and you know, you'll sort of lose control in a way, and you'll probably fall into a pit. So it's one reason on certain parts of this game I like to play it relatively safe, because I don't want to die. You know, dying isn't really a huge deal in this game. I don't think you get anything extra for getting, you know, a one life clear in this game. There aren't really credits per se, because, or lives or anything like that, because it's just once your energy runs out, you're dead. It's game over, and then you have to use the continue function. So, so there is no, like, I guess you could call it a one credit clear, but this game kind of defaults to a one life clear if you're trying to beat the game, you know, without dying. So, the loss of a life is a game over, basically, I guess is what I'm saying. So. And that's actually not good. I'm going to try to bump into that right there and then not get this weapon. That was actually very tight, but we managed to avoid it. I'd rather have Launch Fist number 3 as opposed to having the bomb attack. And let's just try to jump over this guy. Yeah, so level 3 is as high as you can go with these weapons, and we're just gonna We're just gonna skip this guy. You don't even have to fight the enemies, you can just roll right past them. I thought to myself the other day, man, it could be fun to try to do like a, not necessarily like a pacifist run, but just do like a speed run or something where you just tank your way through all the enemies, you just hold right and just continue to walk forward. So this is one of the bosses I was talking about earlier where I felt that, you know, this probably should have been the first boss in the game, as opposed to, you know, the stage 6 boss, because every boss up to this point has been sort of a normal enemy in a way. But this guy actually looks unique, he's got a different color palette, he stands out better on this, you know, this level area. And he shoots projectiles. I mean, other enemies shoot projectiles too, but I don't know, it's just one of those things where, like, bosses should be, they should stick out in your mind as being unique. You know, they should be different to what you experienced leading up to them. But when it's just yet another pterodactyl, it loses its impact, especially if it's not difficult. Or especially if it's difficult for all the wrong reasons, like, you know, the enemies that will dash right at you when you attack them, and you can't do anything. You pretty much have to sit back on the other side of the screen and tank, because you can't jump over them, and in most cases you can't duck under them either. And that was actually really close. I almost fell through that platform. I barely made that jump, so that's something you gotta keep in mind in this game. You can do baby jumps in this game, but it's not really all that useful on these later sections in the game. So you can shoot through platforms in this section as well, so sometimes what I like to do is get down here, just use my spread shot here. It shoots, you know, 2 shots go at 45-degree angles, both, you know, up and down. And so you can use that to your advantage if you're trying to get through the game with taking as little damage as possible. See, I'm not normally the kind of person that cares that much about getting through a game without taking hits or things like that. I just like to get through games. If I can get like a 1 credit clear, you know, I'm usually pretty happy with that. You know, as I play the game more, I don't ever aim for a 1 credit clear or a damageless run or anything like that when I play it. But Dynowarz is so uninteresting compared to a lot of other NES games of the era that I start to think about those things more, because it starts to make the game more interesting. Just for me personally. Not everyone's gonna feel the same way. This is one of those games that falls into the category of, you know, just because it's easy doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. You know, this is a game that could appeal to a bunch of different people. People that don't like, you know, super difficult challenges that, you know, require lots and lots of memorization in order to get through. Although I'd argue those are the most satisfying experiences when you overcome those challenges, because you've really accomplished something. When you beat Dynowarz, you don't really accomplish anything. It's just, you know, it's like hitting start, holding right, and then winning. That's kind of Dynowarz in a nutshell. I know it's not that easy, but it is, you know, the kind of game where you can continue infinitely. The sections are not very difficult. In the dino areas itself, or themselves, you actually don't even have to platform all that much. There aren't that many endless pits. Most of the endless pits are actually on these human sections here. But yeah, just because it's a cakewalk doesn't mean like it's not enjoyable. I did enjoy this game quite a bit as a kid, and it is one of those games that I revisited multiple times over the years, not just for Let's Plays, but just for my own personal enjoyment. But the more and more I work at this YouTube channel, and the more and more I get better at these games, the less and less I start to enjoy games like Dynowarz like I used to. So my enjoyment of them definitely changes as more demanding experiences basically become the norm for me. So let's just kind of fall down here like this. And we're gonna go ahead and grab this laser. It's better than the punch fist. So this is our final level, by the way. So not much else to the game, you know. And look, we're fighting a pterodactyl again. He drops some energy as he always does. Not that we really needed it, but I'll take it. And let's see what this guy drops too. Another laser, I'll take that. Still calling it a laser even though it's called the beam. Just can't learn. Yeah, so this guy basically just charges right at you, and you can't really do much about it. You know, I tried jumping over him, and I just wasn't able to do it without taking damage. So if you're still watching up to this point, I'm actually really curious if you have played Dynowarz and what your thoughts are on the game. Do you enjoy it? Is it an easy romp for you that's just relatively relaxing? Or are you one of those players that actually has trouble with it? Definitely post something in the comments and let me know if you made it to this point in the video. We're actually getting close to the end of the video, but like I said, what we're going to do is we're going to try to activate some of those passwords to unlock a couple of extra features in the game. Nothing really special, it's just a sound test, and then it's just a an enemy viewer, apparently, but we'll see what those look like on the title screen. And this guy is jumping, so we have to actually watch out for this. He's gonna end up just tanking. We might actually end up dying here. Might actually end up dying. Ooh, that was really, really close. That was super close. And look, we got most of our energy back. I'll take it. So, I almost feel like your energy on each section is actually its own separate health bar, which is kind of nice. So, you know, when you almost fail like I did there on that dino section, you get back to this section and your life is almost refilled. Because that's what my health was at, I believe, on the end of the last level. But this is pretty much it. You know, we do the exact same thing we've done up to this point, and we have to defeat the core again, and it's as easy as it ever has been. And then we run back out, hop on the rising platform, and that's it. We beat the game. It just shows us the ending and gives us the credits and whatnot. So nothing too terribly special here. You know, these platforming sections here, they definitely require you to kind of be on point, because your character, you know, despite being as thin as he is here, it is still a little tricky sometimes to land on those moving blue platforms. I have died to them many, many times over the years. Not yet on this playthrough, fortunately, but it has happened quite a bit. And if you're in like a speedrunning kind of mood, you can just try to jump over those spikes, not even worry about the platforms. Alright, almost there, guys. Almost there. It is almost over. So just taking my time here. You're not timed or anything like that in this game. You can just sit here forever if you want. And that turret on the bottom always has a tendency of dropping a barrier. And so if you get here with very low health, you know, you can grab that barrier, which we'll go ahead and do. We don't need it, but we'll get it anyway. And then we basically work our way back, and then that's pretty much it. So that is Dynowarz. So one of the other things that, you know, is kind of sad about this game is these sections themselves aren't inherently bad. I actually do enjoy them, but they look the same every time you get to them. It's the same boss every time you get to them with just a different platform variation. But I'm pretty sure they always take the same amount of hits. They basically do the same thing with their projectiles. It's just, again, this game is one of those examples where I just feel like it missed its potential big time. One of the things that they could have done to improve, you know, on this game's variety is give us a different level boss on every one of these levels. But I think one of the problems with Dynowarz is they tried to cram what is effectively two different games into one, which on one hand, you know, adds to the variety and whatnot, which can be nice, and honestly, back in the day, it was refreshing, but it also kind of takes away from the overall quality of either or section. So, like, the Dino section isn't as fleshed out as it could be if it was just an entire game on its own, and the human platforming section's not anywhere near as fleshed out as it probably could have been if it was just its own game on its own. So it's just one of those things that, you know, you can have some mild enjoyment out of it, but ultimately it's just sort of a half-baked effort, and it missed its potential big time. So, you know, I haven't had like a ranty, rambly Let's Play like this in quite some time, because a lot of the games I play these days have a lot more to talk about gameplay-wise, you know, with the technical details and stuff like that. But this game doesn't have as much of that. We did talk about some of it, but again, you know, the game can be a little bit of a bore to play, and so, you know, naturally I have to get a little more rambly and ranty about it. So that is pretty much it. Congratulations, you finished another great game from Bandai. Also, I actually was looking on the cutting room floor, and I found it interesting that the company that developed this, or the studio that developed this, I don't know if they were underneath like Bandai, or if they were external to Bandai and Bandai just published their stuff, but they developed other winning titles, such winning titles like Circus Caper on the NES and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Although interestingly, they apparently did Super Godzilla on the Super Nintendo, which I didn't know about. And then they also did the East conversions on the Famicom, or at least the first two, East Books 1 and 2. And then they apparently supposedly did East 3 on Super Nintendo, which might account for some of my complaints with that game. We actually streamed that a couple months ago, and there were some major technical problems with that version of East 3. Still enjoyed it, but there's some major issues with it. But yeah, they did a couple of other games, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, so let's go ahead and hit the reset button here, and we'll enter some of these passwords like I said. And we'll see what they do. So for the sound test here, what you're going to do is do 1965. So 1965. And there we go. So you can't actually see anything, but basically what happens is you press A to play, and then you press B to cycle through the tracks. Wow, so even the sound test menu is kind of lazy. Oh, man. That's crazy. So most games, if you do a sound test menu, it actually will pop up with like at least a numeric value, so you know what track you're on. But this game apparently doesn't have that. It does have the actual sounds as well, which is always kind of nice. You know, I never really appreciated this function back in the day, but as a YouTuber and Twitch streamer that, you know, might want to use some sound effects from some games, having an actual just sound test menu, sound effect test menu is actually kind of handy, because I can plug this up, just record some sound effects, and then throw them into my stream as alert sounds or something like that, which I actually should do. So, alright, let's go ahead and hit, oh, never mind, you just have to hit start, and then you can get out of that and do it again. So that's cool, we don't even have to reset. Alright, so the next big one is the enemy viewer, which is 7777, so 4 sevens. And that is it. So now you can actually, it looks like you can push up and down, and the enemy on the right turns into different enemies in the game. And there we go. So, and that's it. It's not even all the enemies. It's not like all the bosses or anything. It is just, it's all the small enemies. Wow. Okay. Well, that is not nearly as cool as I thought it was going to be. I thought like it was going to take us to a different screen. We're going to be able to analyze all the bosses and stuff like that. But it's just the tiny enemies. So, well, okay. Well, we just ended Dynowarz on a bit of a whimper. But hey, at least you guys got to see some of these things. So, but that's pretty much it, guys. I don't have anything else to add about Dynowarz. It is a game. I do still kind of mildly enjoy it, but I can't see myself coming back to it anytime soon. It's one of those games I probably go through once every 5 years, which I think was when I did my last Let's Play. You know, so maybe 5 years from now I'll do it on like a NES variety stream or something, but yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, you know, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, or if you hate everything about life, give it a thumbs down. If you're new to my channel, definitely consider subscribing. I've got a lot of Let's Plays like this, and many more to come. And for everyone already subbed, thanks for your continued support. Hope you guys continue to enjoy these videos, and until the next one, take it easy.